Now we're going to need to connect to the database, okay? So we need to do this as we're going to be running some queries later on, okay, in the users table. So to do this, we're going to need to go back to our database, okay, by going to the cPanel and then MySQL databases. And we're going to need the name of our database and the name of the user, okay? So that's the user and that's the database. Okay, we are going to need also the password that we generated earlier. So to connect to the database, we're going to create a variable, okay, called link, okay, and inside this variable, we're going to store the output of the function, okay, MySQLi connect. So this function is going to take 4 parameters. So the first parameter is going to be the host, okay? In our case, we are using the local host, so it's going to be localhost. The second parameter is the user, okay? So in our case, the user is my notes, okay? And the third one is going to be the password, okay? And then the last one is the name of our database. So in our case, we're going for this one. So let's just copy that. Okay. So now we're gonna check if the connection is successful, okay? So to do this, we're gonna check the outputs of the error function or connection error function, which is MySQLi connect error, okay? So if we get any errors, then we are going to use the function die, okay, which will print something and stop the whole PHP code, okay? So we're gonna write something like this. Error unable to connect, for example. Okay. And also, if you want, for testing purposes, you can add the actual error returned by this function. Okay. We'll still need to connect in other files. So to avoid repetition, what we're going to do, we're going to copy this code, okay, inside a file that we're gonna call connection.php, and then we're gonna include this file, okay, inside our signup file. Okay. So let's open this file. And copy the code inside. Okay. Now we are ready to check the user inputs, okay? So the first step we're gonna do here is defining error messages. So these are any potential errors, okay, that the user might encounter when trying to sign up. So we're gonna store them inside variables, okay? So the first error would be missing username. Okay. We're gonna store them inside a paragraph. Okay. So we're going to place each error inside a paragraph, okay? And at the end, when we process the code, we can place all these paragraphs inside a div like this, okay? And we can decorate it using the alert, danger classes, okay? So the next one is missing email, okay? And then invalid email, and then missing password. Also, we can go for invalid password, okay? If we add some requirements to our password, like having at least 1 digit or stuff like that. And also we're going to be checking that these two passwords match, okay? And finally, if we miss password 2, we're going to say missing password 2. Okay, and you can choose the wording for each of these paragraphs. To save time, I've copied my wording straight away, okay? But feel free to change this as you like. So, couple of comments. So the password is gonna have a few requirements. So we're gonna need at least 6 characters, okay? And we're gonna need 1 capital letter and at least 1 number, okay? And I have added the strong tag to make the text look bold, okay? Now let's get the user inputs. So let's start with the username. So first we're going to check if the user has actually submitted a username. So to do this, we're going to use a function called isSet. So this function is going to check if we have inside the post associative array a value corresponding to the element username. Okay, so we can check the opposite using an exclamation mark. Okay, so if the username is not set, we're going to add the error corresponding to missing username, okay, to a variable that we're going to call errors. Okay, so initially this variable is going to be empty. Okay, so if the username is missing, we're going to add this paragraph to this variable. Okay, else we are going to store the filtered variable inside a variable called username. So to filter the username, we're going to use the function filter_var. Okay, so if you remember, this function is going to take a couple of parameters. So the first parameter is going to be the value to filter. Okay, in our case, post username. And the second parameter for a string is going to be filter_sanitize string. Okay. Now let's get the email. Okay. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. So we're going to check if the email, okay, is set. Okay, and let's use an exclamation mark as well there. Okay, so if the email is missing, we're going to add to the errors variable, okay, the error corresponding to missing email. Okay. Else, if the email is provided, then we're going to filter our email, okay, and store the results in a variable we're going to call email. Okay, so again, we're going to use the function filter var, and it's going to take a couple of parameters. So the first one is going to be the email, and the second parameter is going to be filter sanitize email. Okay. All right, so now we filtered the email. Okay. Now we're going to check if it's actually a valid email. Okay. So to do this, we're going to use again the filter var function. Okay. So we're gonna have a couple of parameters again. So the first one is the actual email, okay, that we stored inside the email variable. And the second parameter this time is going to be filter validate email. So this is going to validate our email, okay. So we can use the exclamation mark, okay, to check the opposite. So if the email is not valid, then we're going to add to our errors variable the error corresponding to invalid email. Okay. Now let's get the password. Okay. All the passwords. Okay. So let's check first if the user submitted the first password. So we're checking the value corresponding to password. Okay. So if you remember, we named this field password, and that's one password 2. Okay. All right. So if the password is missing, so let's use an exclamation mark for the opposite. All right. Then we're going to add to the errors variable, okay, the error corresponding to missing password. Okay. Else, okay, we are going to check if the submitted password verifies all the requirements. So the first one is the password needs to be at least 6 characters, and then we want the password to include at least 1 capital letter and at least 1 number, okay, or 1 digit. So we're going to use else if, okay, as we're going to have another else. So we're going to check if the length of the password is less than 6. Okay. Otherwise, we can just put all the good conditions, okay, and then we can add an exclamation mark, okay, before the conditions to check the opposite. So to check the length of the password, we're going to use the function string length, okay. So you're going to check the length of post password, okay, and we're going to check if that's greater than 6. Okay, and the second condition is that the password includes at least 1 capital letter. So you're gonna use a regex for this. So the function to use is preg match. Okay, it's going to take a couple of parameters. So the first one is going to be the regex, and the second one is the value that we're checking, which is post password. So the regex for a capital letter is going to be as following. We're going to have between brackets, okay, a minus sign z, capital A, capital Z. Okay. And the last condition, we're going to use exactly the same syntax. Okay, instead of A to Z, we're going to use 0 to 9. Okay, so making sure that the password includes 1 digit at least. So the condition is going to end here. Okay, and we're going to be checking the opposite. All right. And I'm going to need to add 1 parenthesis to close this one. Okay. Now, if there is an error, I'm going to add to the errors variable the error corresponding to invalid password. Okay. Now, if the password is valid, okay, then we're going to filter the password and store it inside a variable password. Okay. We're going to use again the function filter var. We're going to have a couple of parameters. So the first one is the password, and the second one is going to be filter sanitize string. Now we're going to check if the second password is missing. Okay, and we're going to stay inside this block of code. So if the second password is missing, then we're going to add another error. Okay, otherwise we're going to do something else. So we're going to do exactly the same thing we did for the first password. So the condition is the same. We're looking here at password 2. Okay. So if that password is missing, we're going to add this time to the errors variable missing password 2. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to filter this password and then compare it with the first password. So to filter the password, we're going to do exactly the same thing we did for the first password and then store it in a variable password 2. Okay. Now we're going to check if the two passwords are the same. If password is different from password 2, okay, then we're gonna add another error, and this time it's going to be different password. Alright. Alright, so in the next video, we're going to check if there are any errors and then display an error message if that's the case.